My mother left me a house I never knew existed, and a single, terrifying instruction: don't go into the attic. The first thing I did was climb the stairs. The key was cold in my hand, a tarnished silver thing that felt older than grief. It had arrived in a stiff, legal envelope that smelled of someone else's office, a final piece of my mother delivered by post. Eleanor Vance. I hadn't called her mom since I was 15. Our relationship had been a long, cold silence punctuated by my angry letters and her terse, typed replies. She died as she lived, privately and without warning. The lawyer's voice had been apologetic. The estate was unusual. Not the modest apartment in the city I knew, but a full, freestanding house on the edge of the forgotten coastal town of Greywood. A place she had never once mentioned. And a single, handwritten clause in her will: for my daughter, Imogen. The house is yours. But you must not, under any circumstance, enter the sealed attic room. The rest is yours to explore, to sell, to forget. But the attic is not to be opened. It was that prohibition, more than the strange bequest, that pulled me from my life in the city. I was a photographer, skilled at framing other people's truths while keeping my own out of focus. My mother had been my greatest mystery. Now, she had left me a crime scene with a locked door at its heart. The house, named Whispering Pines on the faded deed, was a Victorian skeleton wrapped in ivy, standing sentinel on a cliff overlooking a furious grey sea. It didn't whisper, it groaned. The wind off the water sawed through loose slats, a constant, mournful exhalation. The key fit the front door with a sound like a bone cracking. Inside, time had been preserved under a shroud of dust. It was not the home of the pragmatic, detached woman I knew. This place was filled with texture and color. Velvet drapes, though faded. A grand piano, its lid shut like a coffin. Books spilled from shelves, their spines cracked with use. And photographs. Dozens of them, in frames on every surface. Not of me. Of a woman with my mother's eyes but a softer mouth, a freer smile, standing on cliffs, holding wildflowers, her hair whipped by the same wind that now haunted the halls. In every picture, she looked vibrantly, desperately alive. Who was this woman? What happened to her? I spent the first day in a state of agitated reverence, touching the artifacts of this stranger who was my mother. In the kitchen, I found a cup still on the drain board, a ghost of tea stain in its bottom. In the study, her handwriting filled margins of books on botany and astronomy. This was a life of curiosity, of passion. A life she had completely hidden from me. And all the while, my eyes were drawn to the ceiling, to the subtle line in the hallway plaster that indicated a pull-down attic door, secured by a heavy padlock. The lawyer had given me no key for that. The silence on the second night was different. The wind died, and in the hollow quiet, I heard it. A faint, rhythmic scratch-scritch-scratch. It was coming from above. Not the scamper of an animal, but a deliberate, persistent sound. Like a fingernail on wood. Like someone trying to get out. My blood turned to ice. Don't go into the attic. Her warning was now a scream in my head. But the sound, it was a question. It was a plea. On the third day, I found the diary. It was tucked inside a hollowed-out copy of Wuthering Heights on her nightstand. The first entry was dated the year I was born. My darling Imogen was born today. 7 pounds of perfect fury. I looked into her eyes and saw the future. I must be brave for her. I must forget the past. For her, I will lock it all away. The entries were love letters to me, chronicling my first steps, my first words, her overwhelming fear that she would not be enough. Then, the tone changed. Around my 5th birthday, the writing became frantic. She looks more like her every day. The same smile. The same tilt of the head when she listens. It's a haunting. A beautiful, painful haunting. John says I'm imagining it, but I see her. I see my sister in my daughter's eyes. My heart stopped. her sister. I had no aunt. No family at all, ever. It was just me and her. I flipped forward, my hands trembling. An entry from when I was 15, the year our Cold War began. I pushed her away today. I had to. She asked about the lullaby, the one that plays in her dreams. She hummed the tune. The tune she used to sing. I saw the recognition in Imogen's eyes, a memory that isn't hers. It's seeping through the walls. The past is not staying locked. I must be colder, harder. To protect her from the truth, I must make her hate me. I dropped the diary as if it had burned me. The lullaby. A mournful, four-note melody that had haunted my childhood dreams. I could hear it in my head now, clearer than ever. The scratching that night was louder, more desperate. It was accompanied by a new sound, a faint, muffled humming. The same four-note tune from my dreams. It wasn't coming from inside my head. It was drifting down from the attic. My mother's warning ward with a lifetime of unanswered questions. She had pushed me away to protect me from a truth living in our own house. A truth with my face. With a resolve forged from 20 years of silence, I dragged a chair into the hallway. I would not live with this ghost. I took a crowbar from the tool shed. The padlock was strong, but the wood around it was rotten. With a cry that was part fear, part fury, I wrenched the wood until the lock tore free. The door slid down with a thunderous crash, releasing a cloud of dust and the overpowering scent of dried roses and decay. A set of folding stairs descended into the darkness. The humming stopped. The air grew deathly still. I took a flashlight, my breath shallow, and began to climb. The beam cut through the black, illuminating floating dust motes like disturbed spirits. And then, it landed on a shape in the corner. Not a trunk, not a box. A chair. An old, velvet-upholstered chair. And in it, draped in a shawl bleached by time, sat a skeleton. Its delicate fingers were curled around a faded, leather-bound book. And on its skull, resting where hair would have been, was a crown of dried, brittle roses. This was not a secret. This was a burial. My mother hadn't just hidden her past. She had entombed it. And as the beam of my light shook, it traveled past the chair to the far wall, which was not a wall at all, but a floor-to-ceiling collage of photographs, drawings, and newspaper clippings. All of them were of me. My childhood, my school events, my life in the city, a lifetime of stolen, secret moments I never knew were being watched. And in the center of it all, a single, bold headline from a yellowed newspaper: local woman, Violet Vance, disappears from cliffside home, presumed dead. The date was 35 years ago. The woman in the photograph, the vibrant woman from the frames downstairs, my mother's twin, smiled back at me. She had my eyes. The humming began again, this time not in my head, but a chilling, tangible vibration in the air around the skeletal figure, as the flashlight finally died, plunging me into a darkness that now had a name: Violet. The darkness was absolute, a suffocating velvet pressed against my eyes. The humming didn't stop, it vibrated in the still, cold air, weaving around me, the same lullaby from my dreams, now a dirge. My flashlight was dead. My phone was downstairs. I was trapped in the attic with my dead aunt. A hysterical sound, part sob, part laugh, caught in my throat. Protect me from this? This was what my mother thought she was saving me from? The corpse of her twin sister, kept like a perverse heirloom? I forced air into my lungs, the scent of roses and decay now a taste on my tongue. Move. Get out. I crawled backward, hands scraping on the rough floorboards, until my foot found the top of the folding stairs. I half fell, half scrambled down, crashing into the hallway below. I slammed the attic door shut, but it wouldn't latch, hanging crookedly from its broken frame. The opening was a black maw, breathing cold air into the hall. I spent the rest of the night barricaded in the parlor, a fire blazing though it did nothing to melt the ice in my veins. The legal envelope felt like it weighed 100 pounds. I spread its contents on the floor. the deed, the will, a surveyor's map. And a smaller, sealed envelope I'd overlooked, marked for Imogen, when she is ready. In that moment, drenched in terror, I was as ready as I'd ever be. It was not my mother's handwriting. It was elegant, looping, an artful script. My dearest Imogen, if you are reading this, you have defied your mother. Good. You always had her courage, even if she tried to bury it. My name is Violet. I was your mother's other half. We were the Vance twins, famous in this little town for our laughter, our mischief, our identical faces. And for our love of the same man, John, your father. The story your mother believed, the story she told the police, is that I walked into the sea in a fit of heartbreak. The story she told herself is that it was her fault. The true story is in the journal I hold. Eleanor was always the stronger one, the practical one. But she was blind where John was concerned. He was a storm, beautiful and destructive. He promised me the world, then promised it to her when he learned she had inherited this house. I confronted him here, in the attic, the night I died. He said he would never choose a penniless artist over the heiress of Whispering Pines. He didn't push me. Not exactly. We struggled. He grabbed my arms. I fell backward, against the old brick chimney. It was quick. I saw the terror in his eyes, not grief, but the calculation of a man seeing his future crumbling. He called Eleanor my strong, practical sister. And she, to protect her dream, her unborn child, you, Imogen, helped him hide me. They walled me up in the very attic where I took my last breath, and they told the world Violet Vance was a runaway, a suicide. For years, my spirit was trapped, screaming into the silence. Then you were born. You were a tiny, bright window in my dark. You could hear me. You hummed my lullaby. Your love for this place, your curiosity, it gave me strength. I called to you through the dreams I sent, through the whispers in the walls. I needed you to find me. To tell the world my name. Your mother's love for you was real, but it was built on a grave. She lived her life in penance, guarding this terrible secret. You must decide what to do with it. The truth is yours now. With all the love I could never give you. Your Aunt Violet. The letter fluttered from my fingers. My father. My quiet, absent father who died in a sailing accident when I was 10. A man my mother never spoke of. A murderer. And my mother, his accomplice. Their entire marriage, my entire childhood, was a performance staged over a corpse. The haunted woman in the photographs downstairs wasn't grieving a lost sister, she was living with her. The following day was a blur of numb horror. I called the only person mentioned in the diary who might still be alive, David, my mother's younger brother, the estranged uncle I'd met once as a child. He answered on the second ring, his voice rough with age and surprise. When I told him I was at Whispering Pines, the silence stretched so long I thought the line had gone dead. She left it to you, he finally said, a deep sadness in his tone. After everything, she finally let it go. She didn't let anything go, David. She kept it all in the attic. Another pause, sharper. You went up there. Violet wrote me a letter. I heard his sharp intake of breath. Oh, Eleanor, he whispered, a lament. You fool. He agreed to come, not as family, but as the only other soul who knew fragments of the story. While I waited, I did the unthinkable. I climbed back into the attic in the stark daylight. The skeleton was less a terror now and more a profound tragedy. I carefully pried the journal from its grasp. Its pages were filled with sketches of the cliffs, the sea, and passionate, angry poetry. The final entry was a single, furious line, John has chosen the house over me. Tonight, I take back what is mine. David arrived at dusk, an old man with my mother's eyes filled with a lifetime of regret. He didn't need to see the attic. He saw the truth on my face. We sat in the parlor, and he filled in the gaps. Your father was a charmer, but hollow. He saw a path to security through your mother. Violet was the wildfire, brilliant, unstable, impossible to control. He was afraid of her. The night she died, your mother was hysterical. She believed she had driven Violet to it by stealing John. The cover-up was his idea, but she consented. To protect you, she said. To give you a normal life. She spent every day after that building a prison of guilt around herself and around you. Why didn't you tell anyone? I asked, my voice hollow. And condemn my sister to prison? Leave you an orphan? It was a monstrous choice, Imogen. There was no right answer, only varying degrees of damnation. I chose my sister. I have lived with that. He looked at the ceiling, towards the attic. She sang that lullaby to both of them when they were girls. It was their secret comfort. The fact that you knew it, it was proof to Eleanor that Violet was still here, still angry. She thought if she kept you away, kept you from loving this place, the thread would snap. After David left, promising discretion but no answers, the house felt different. The wind's groan was now Violet's sigh. The scratching in the walls was her restless fingers. She wasn't a malevolent ghost, she was a wronged woman, my aunt, who had been trying for decades to tell me her story. My mother's entire life had been a monument to a single, catastrophic lie. And I was its living legacy. That night, I didn't barricade myself in. I lit every candle I could find and brought them to the foot of the attic stairs. I opened Violet's journal to a random page, a beautiful sketch of the moon over the cove. And I began to read aloud. I read her poetry, her dreams, her frustrations. I read for hours, until my voice was hoarse. I was giving her a voice, the one that had been silenced by brick and family shame. The oppressive cold in the hallway began to retreat. The silence that followed felt peaceful, attentive. As dawn tinged the sky gray, I made a decision. I could not leave her in the dark. But I could not call the police, could not drag my mother's name and my own through a decades-old scandal. There was another way. A Vance way. A secret for a secret. I went to the tool shed as the first birds began to sing. I selected a shovel, its metal head cold in my hand. I walked past the house, down the overgrown path to the wild cliff's edge where the sisters had played, where the newspaper said Violet had vanished. In a sheltered spot under a twisted, wind-sculpted pine, I began to dig. The earth was stubborn, but my resolve was harder. I dug a grave worthy of a lost twin. I had promised my aunt a voice, but to give her peace, I would have to bury the truth with my own hands, next to the sea that had been waiting for her all along. The grave under the pine was ready. The morning sun, weak and pale, did little to warm the chill clinging to my bones or the heavier weight in my chest. I had wrapped Violet's remains in the cleanest linen I could find in the house, a sad shroud for a life ended in betrayal. Carrying her down from the attic, each step on the folding stairs a solemn note in a final procession, felt like the most sacred and terrible duty of my life. She was so light. A bundle of forgotten history and stolen years. I laid her in the earth, on a bed of soft moss I'd gathered from the garden. For a long moment, I stood at the edge of the grave, staring down. This wasn't just my aunt. This was the hidden heart of my family, the silenced truth that had twisted my mother's love into something fearful and oppressive. This was the ghost whose lullaby had been my cradle song. I picked up a handful of soil. It was dark, rich, and cold. "I'm sorry," I whispered, my voice raw. "I'm sorry no one came for you. I'm sorry my love came 35 years too late." I let the dirt fall from my fingers. It landed with a soft, final sound. Your name was Violet Vance. You were an artist. You loved the sea. And you were loved. I repeated these truths like a mantra with every shovelful, building a cairn of words over her as I built a mound of earth. I told her about the world she'd missed, about the colors of the sunsets she'd sketched, about how the wild roses still bloomed on the cliff path. I gave her the decades of conversation we'd never had. When the grave was filled, I placed a simple, smooth stone from the beach at its head. No inscription. The wind and the rain would know. The pine would know. I would know. Back in the house, the silence had transformed. The desperate, scratching energy was gone. The halls felt still, not with emptiness, but with a quiet equilibrium, as if a storm had finally passed. The barricade of fear I'd felt was dismantled. I could now see the house for what it was, not a tomb, but a testament to a profound, tragic love between sisters, a love that had turned to ash and been preserved in guilt. I spent the next week not running, but walking slowly through every room. I touched the piano keys, and they let out a soft, discordant chime. I opened the curtains in rooms that hadn't seen light in years. I read my mother's diaries again, no longer with the hurt of a rejected daughter, but with the aching pity of a fellow woman who understood the unbearable weight she'd carried. Her coldness, her distance, it was the panicked thrashing of someone drowning in a secret, pushing away the one person she wanted most to save for fear of pulling her under too. She had loved me with a love so terrified it had turned to ice. The decision about the house became clear. I could not sell it. To sell it would be to complete the act my father began, to trade it for money and forget the blood in its soil. I also could not live in it. It was not my story to inhabit, it was theirs. A museum of a finished tragedy. Instead, I called a lawyer. I drew up a deed, creating the Vance Trust. Whispering Pines would be converted, with careful, respectful renovation, into a residency for artists, painters, writers, musicians, who needed solitude and fierce beauty to create. A plaque in the entrance hall would read, "In memory of Violet Vance, artist, and Eleanor Vance, keeper of silence. May this house foster the voices they could not free." It would be a place for creation, not decay. For voices, not secrets. Violet would have her artists. My mother would have her penance, made public and transformed into a fragile, lasting good. On my last day, I packed a single suitcase. I took only 2 things from the house, the framed photograph of my mother as a young, vibrant woman on the cliff, and Violet's leather-bound journal. I stood in the parlor one final time. The afternoon light streamed through the clean windows, painting golden shapes on the floorboards. For the first time, I saw not a haunted house, but a sad, beautiful one. It had held its breath for a generation, and now, it could finally exhale. I walked out, locking the door behind me. The key, that cold piece of silver, I threw into the sea from Violet's cliff. Let the waves keep it. I got in my car and drove away, not looking back in the rearview mirror. I didn't need to. I was carrying them both with me. The haunting was over. Not because the ghost was gone, but because it had been seen, acknowledged, and laid to rest. The silence between my mother and me would never be filled with words, but it was now filled with understanding. She had spent her life building a wall to protect me from a monster. She never understood that the monster was the wall itself. My inheritance was not a house. It was the truth. And with that truth, I was finally free to build a life that was not a fortress, but an open window. I went to my mother's house to uncover a secret, and I discovered that the most haunting ghost of all was the love that had been forced to wear a mask of silence for 35 years.